Nice to meet you. I'm Michał Marciniak. I'm location lead of Warsaw Grid Dynamics office, and it's a pleasure to host you. Together with my team, we are really happy to see you here. At the beginning, I would like to show you some more information about Grid Dynamics. I will take a couple of minutes because I'm not sure if you know, but after that we can make some discussion during the networking. Also, it will be a good moment to share some more information to discuss and to maybe ask you for some comments about the presentation, about our approach. After that, after this short presentation, I will give the voice to Vlad and Ilya, and it will be the cherry on the top of this meeting. At the end, as you may know, in the agenda there will be a time for networking, so also feel free to use all of our rooms here available, also to use our kitchen, and to share your thoughts and comments. So let me start. This one is for start.
To click on the presentation, just click on it.
Okay. So as you may know, Grid Dynamics was established in 2006, so we are 18 years on the market. So we are the global provider of IT services in case of consulting, agile custom software development, analytics, and we are working with Fortune 1000 companies and Global 2000 enterprises globally, on the world. Yeah, we are present in 18 countries across the world. So with more than 35, 40 field locations and engineering centers. So you can see that, going through the follow the sun model, we are able to deliver, the full service in each country and for companies working in different locations. In total, 4,500 engineers globally. In Poland, we have 4 locations. So this one is the newest one, the Warsaw one. The rest is Kraków, Wrocław, and Gdańsk. So we are in Warsaw. This is the newest and fastest growing location. In Poland, we have more than 1,200 engineers. And at the end, I would like also to mention that Grid Dynamics is a NASDAQ listed company since 2020, so 2020. Yeah, in case of partnerships and cooperation with top 500, top 1,000 companies, so you can see that we are working in different business areas. It is media and high tech, manufacturing and CPG, healthcare and retail and different brands. So you can see we shared here a couple of brands with who we are working. We are working in different cooperation models. So this is a little bit staff augmentation. We are working also in Fixbit. We are building pods. We are delivering different services for those companies. Not only those are the examples. Also, we have technical partnerships. So with hyperscalers, so it's Amazon, Google, Microsoft. In case of AI, machine learning area, it's Snowflake, Dataiku, Databricks, and different. Digital commerce, SAP, which is also known Broadleaf. So we are working with them. And here you can see that. In case of the community of practice, so we are working in different communities. Also, we have different practices here, and we are specializing in them. So big data, DevOps, QA automation, data engineering, mobile analysis. Also, in case of management, so we are also having a lot of project managers. We are also specializing nowadays in AI, machine learning, and in search. So also on our main webpage, you can see some of our projects which we done, and also our services which we are providing to different clients, which they are allowed to show publicly. If you join Grid Dynamics, you can take one of the path from those three you can see now on the screen. So it's the technical part, so probably it will be the most interesting for you. So starting, we have really interesting internship program. So starting from the beginning, you can go and grow with us together, with our senior engineers, taking and using our different tools, programs, spending time, in one-to-one meetings, with leaders, mentors. Also, we have, when you will reach senior engineering level T3, you can choose two different paths. It's managerial one, and the second one is architectural path. Also, in architectural part and technical part, we have also city office, and they are working on our R&D projects, and in case of supporting and growing this area. In case of attracting, growing, and retraining top talent, so you can see that we are starting in case of cooperation with the universities, but also we are really active on the market. So comparing those two areas, we can move forward, build the teams, and we can grow like we are doing it now. We are using different tools which are developed also by us. So the leading one is Grid University. So this is the platform developed directly by us. We have this platform has around 5 years, and there is a lot of trainings from different disciplines. And you can use it when you are joining Grid Dynamics. You can use it without any problems. And also we are trying to improve and make as much needed. And we are also putting a lot of trainings there. We are organizing a lot of dynamic talks. About them I will tell something more in a few seconds. We are organizing boot camps, and we have also our Grid Lab. Here, Grid University. So here you can see more information about this platform, which is developed by us, as I mentioned. So we have more than 250 courses from different disciplines. Also, if there is something, appearing on the market which is needed, or in case of developing and working on some projects, also some training is needed. Also, we are, improving it, adding new courses. Most of the courses are, prepared and by our engineers. And also we have partnerships, but most of them they are done by us. We are also organizing dynamic talks. So as you can see that we had already more than 15,000 attendees during those dynamic talks. So leading experts are joining and organizing the discussions about the technology, about digital transformation, partnerships, and trends. They are really interesting, and you can also check more details on our page. In case of our daily basis cooperation and work, you can see here now you are sitting and we are organizing this in our chill space. So normally here is the ping pong table and different stuff. So here we are spending our free time. We have different initiatives, if different groups of interests. So we are playing together, tennis, table, football. We have some also a music band, but it's not in Warsaw. And yeah, so we are organizing a lot of initiatives, the local one. In case of the tech talks, also we are organizing, some really chill initiatives like, pizza days, coffee with HR and lazy breakfast, something like that. So our team is working on it to also attract our daily basis. In case of joining us, we are here. We can talk in case of joining, what is the procedure, about some open positions, about the projects. Also, if you'll find us here somewhere, for sure, we can tell you something more about it. What you will find in Grid Dynamics: you will work with brilliant colleagues. You will become an expert, and you will create your own career path. So as I showed you, those three paths. So basing on it, taking, all of the tools which we are offering, you can really grow with us and attract your expertise. If you would like to find some more opportunities, you can scan this QR code or you can talk with us. Thank you so much. Enjoy this meeting. And Vlad, the table is yours. Thanks.
All right, so I believe with that we can finally get started. So hello everyone and welcome here at the Dynamic Talks. I'm glad to see all of you here presenting right there and offline in the office, and welcome here the online guys. So I'm glad to feel your presence. So today we're gathered here to talk about two talks, and one of them will be mine. So I'm going to tell you something I've learned about some advanced use cases of iframes and web applications. And so what this tech talk is actually about is I would like to share my own experience when I used iframes on my project, and I would like to give you guys some tips and tricks on how to use iframes on your projects in the future. So yeah, to understand this whole idea, you need to be already familiar with iframes, but I will explain what it is to people who don't know. So I wonder, have you guys ever used iframes? Are you guys like developers? Okay, so I see some notes here. Yeah, the online guys, you can put some pluses in the chat or something. So I see what I'm working with. All right, yeah, we do have some reactions. Thank you. Yeah, so a couple of words about me. Yes. So this is me. My name is Vlad, and I'm a senior software engineer here in Grid Dynamics. Sometimes I do those dynamic talks because sometimes on a project I find something really interesting and I'm willing to share that with the rest of like engineering community. And this is exactly one of those kind of things. So why don't we get started? So to begin with, I would like to present the plan for today that we're having. So firstly, we'll start with some introduction into the topic. I will explain some basic things about what iframes are, and then we'll move to how to actually use them, how people usually use them on projects. We'll take a look at some common use cases and maybe some more advanced ones. Then I would like to describe the actual problem I've had on my project. And yeah, we'll see how we solved it after we review the solution to it. At the beginning, we'll sum it up and I'll present some tips and tricks on how to enhance your developer experience with iframes and how to use them better, some best practices. And finally, we'll have some time for the Q&A session. So what are iframes? So an iframe is an HTML element. It is something just like that, an iframe. And basically, this is an HTML tag that lets you embed another HTML document inside of your web application. So yeah, it is available vanilla in HTML. You don't need any like front-end framework for that to use or something. And by default, those iframes, they are isolated from the main application. So they don't exchange data from the application they were called from. So here you can see a basic example of how an iframe code may look like in HTML. Yeah, this is very basic. It has not a lot of properties, but such kind of a setup will get you started with some easy example of how to use for iframes, for example, for some easy integration. So now you can think of an iframe as of a window to another web page from your web page. So now let's see how to actually use those. So you guys, you mentioned that you've used iframes before. So what exactly have you used them for? Maybe an integration with some service?
Google Maps.
Google Maps, yeah, this is a very nice example. So I would say that this is the most common example of why would you need an iframe. But yeah, people also use them for a lot of different kind of stuff. So out of the common use cases, I would like to highlight embedding third-party content, just like Google Maps, for example, advertisements. So usually when the website puts some ads on their web page, there might be integrated with an iframe. And for some interactive widgets to embed some interactive content inside of a web page. And yeah, the examples could be Google Maps, YouTube videos, Spotify music, and some other stuff for advertisements and interactive content. But there are more to that when using iframes than just this. So iframes can actually be used for a couple of more, let's say, advanced use cases. And that may include cross-domain data handling. We'll talk about that a bit later. Some real-time content updates, like for example, when you're working on a document together with someone else in a Google Doc or something. And iframes are heavily used for micro frontends these days. Sometimes this is also a use case. Yeah, and some examples could be a Yahoo Finance integration. They show some real-time stock changes inside of iframes. Some Figma stuff, integration, so when you can both collaborate with different people on the same document, and some other stuff for payments and for data handling. So now I would actually like to say that iframes are not only about embedding information into your website. So they have some more complexity to it, and you can use that. So above all, iframe also allow you to integrate and interact some complicated things. You can share data securely between the iframes and the main application, and you can do some real-time updates with the iframes. So you remember earlier, I've mentioned that iframes by default do not share data between themselves and the main application that they were called from. This is actually true by default, but sometimes, and especially for some complex interactions, you may need to exchange information between an iframe and the main app. So, and this is actually the question I would like to answer on today's technical talk. So how to transfer data between an iframe and the main application. And to answer this question, I would actually like to present you guys with the problem I faced on my project recently and how we solved it, because yeah, using iframes is exactly what we did. So let's jump right into that. Yeah, so back in the days, I was working on an SDK project. So it was a software development kit intended to use by other developers to integrate our services inside of their infrastructure. Yeah, they could call our methods, get our data, but this is actually an API, so something intended to use by developers. And it looks something like that. So we had a client who wanted to integrate with our services, and they deployed their application to some domain. And so they had their web application on client.com domain. And so they initialized a connection with our SDK by loading it in a script. And then they just called some methods. For example, they call a method like get data, get users, get orders, any kind of data that we provided. And then the SDK was returning the JSON output back to the web application of the client. So, and then the developers of the client app that developed the application, they did with this data whatever they needed to, displayed it to the user or made some changes, whatever. So in here, this SDK was actually connected via script. It exposed some methods, yeah, mainly about users and orders, and it requested some data from the backend. So all this information about users, for example, it was going from the backend. But now on this yeah, informational graphic, we can't see how the SDK connects to the backend itself. And so now let's dive a bit deeper into that connection. So yeah, here we'll have all the same setup, the client and an SDK, they exchange data, but we also have a third entity. So the backend of our SDK that has all of that information. It has the databases and actually can give information to the frontend side. But there was a very, let's say, strict security requirement that we met. And this backend needed to only accept requests from domains that were allow listed. So it means that the backend may only accept requests from some domains that they know of. So they can't just accept requests from some unknown domains. But that was the whole point, right? So our SDK was intended to be used by other people, and we didn't really want them to give out the information on what domain they will be deployed or something. So let's see how we connected the SDK to the backend and still satisfy this requirement that the backend may only receive requests from the allow listed domains. So actually, we considered two potential solutions. The first one would be a little bit of a brute force solution, and the other one would be connected to the iframes, and it was the solution that we actually used. So yeah, let's talk a bit more about the first one. The first solution, I will call it the allow list solution. So with this solution, we will need to create an allow list and to track each and every domain that was coming. And we will need to allow list every domain that our clients were using. So we'll need to take information from the client and then propagate it to the backend. So now they can accept information from this domain. But yeah, it already sounds complicated, and it is complex to manage, because once we onboard a new client, they will need to give us a full list of their domains they may be operating from, and then we will need to update it. So yeah, it takes a lot of time. Not only it's complex to manage, but it's also not very scalable, because the more clients we will have, the more domains our clients will have. It means we will have more and more work to manage all that. So it would be very difficult to scale. But back in the days, we also thought of another solution that was utilizing iframes. And this is something we will be talking in details today. So by using this solution, we'll talk how it works just right after this slide. But by using this solution, we would only have one allow listed domain. So we will not need to manage a lot of them. And inside of this iframe, we would load some proxy application that will actually make the request to the backend. And yeah, this proxy app would return the requests from the backend, the responses from the backend to the main application. It may sound strange for now, but yeah, we'll jump right into how it works. So to set up this whole infrastructure, I would like to present now what steps should be met to do that. So first things first, we need to set up a proxy application on some allowed domain. This proxy application should listen for incoming messages. A message for an iframe is a way to communicate between an iframe and some other application or domain. Then our SDK will create those messages and send them to the iframe inside of a proxy application. Then this, the SDK will send messages. The proxy application will get the messages, receive them. They will make the request to the backend from the proxy. After that, the backend will send response to the proxy, and proxy will propagate the response back to SDK. So it will look something like that. We'll have a proxy application deployed on allowed.com domain. And inside of the user session of our SDK for our clients, so on client domain, we will open this web application inside of an iframe. Yeah, now it may sound complicated, but now let's just see how it works on a more visual, let's say, pattern. So yeah, we'll have the same old setup. We'll have some client.com website, the client web application that will talk to SDK. The new entity that we will add is the proxy application on some allowed.com domain. So it may make requests to our backend. And finally, we have the backend that will give the data back to SDK and back to client. So now let's see how all they communicate. So first thing what happens, the client application, they need some data. They call the SDK methods, like get user or something. Then the SDK will send a message to the proxy application that is inside of an iframe. And then this proxy application will actually do the HTTP request to the backend using fetch or something. And the SDK backend will then return the response to the proxy app, and proxy application will get it back to SDK. And only after that, the SDK will be able to reply to the client with some JSON. So yeah, this is I would say, complicated architecture, but what do we have here? So as you can see, the client only talks to an SDK. So the client doesn't know nothing about this proxy application or the backend. So we encapsulate all this complicated logic from the client. So they only need to use our API and don't think about all this complicated stuff. But by utilizing all that, what actually happens is we satisfy the backend requirement for security to only have like a limited amount of allow listed domains. And now I would like to tell you how to approach an implementation of something like that. So we'll be talking code, but I would say mainly dummy code. And I would like you to grasp the idea of how to start of an implementation of something like that. So to make this possible, this whole architecture with communication with iframes, proxy apps, and we will need to answer 4 questions. So the first one is how to send messages to the iframe. Yeah, we'll use something that is called post message API. We'll get to that a bit later. Then we need to ask a question, how to receive messages in the iframe. So if the main app sends a message to the iframe, how do we receive it? Then we need to know how to receive messages from the iframe. So if you send a message to the iframe, then the iframe has some data. It wants to share it back with the parent application. We need to know how to manage that. And finally, how to respond back to parent if an iframe has something to share with. So yeah, let's just start with the first question. How to send messages to the iframe. So as I have already mentioned before, we will use something that is called post message API. First things first, we just need to get the iframe we'll be talking to. After that, we need to create the message object. So it could anything. It could be actually be anything. We don't have like any strict requirements on the shape of this message object, but just for the sake of this demo, and yeah, we implemented something like that. We just need the proxy application to understand what we want from it. And so we want, if for this particular message, we would like to request information about a particular user. And so as you can see here in the message object, we have an action field that says what we need to do. We want to get user, and we also have some data attributes. We can pass data using which, and we just want to get a user with a user ID of 1, 2, 3. After we have an iframe, we have a message object setup. Now we can actually send the message to the iframe. So that could be done by calling the post message function. It is available. You don't need any like prior setup for that. Iframes have it. You need to call this post message method on the content window of an iframe you want to talk to, and you just need to pass the message that you created to it. Yeah, as you can see, this post message function, it accepts 2 arguments actually. And the second argument is something that is called a target origin. We'll talk about that a bit later, but I just want you guys to remember it because it's, let's say, important for security reasons. So yeah, now we can send messages to the iframe. Now let's talk about how to receive them from the iframe. So inside of an iframe, you will have some application running, some JavaScript web application. And in this application, you would need to set up an event listener for events of type message. So if you use this post message API, those methods that we talk about, they actually create special events of type message. And so once we receive such a message, after that, we can access the data that we had in this message. So we were passing the action and some data. So after that, we can check what is actually required from the proxy application. In our case, we only have one method, one action type, let's say. So we only want to get a user. And so if the action is get user, then we can actually do stuff. And if everything's correct, we can make a request to the backend using the data attribute that we have. And so what happens here on the line 9, we are fetching from the backend and adding some query parameters to request the user ID that we need. And yeah, so this proxy application can make requests to the backend because it is deployed on some allowed listed domain. And finally, once we have a response from the backend, we can send it to the parent application that initially required this information. So now let's see how to send back the data from iframes. So for that, it is, I would say, kind of easy. You would just need to call, once again, the post message function on the parent attribute of the window. This is, yeah, kind of generic, let's say, when you are using iframes and their communication. And in here, you will just pass the data that you want. In our case, this is a response. And you will also need to pass the second argument, that is the target origin, for the security reasons. At the bottom here, you can see an example, a basic example of how you can use such function. And so, yeah, pretend that we have such some dummy response, like here, it has a status of success and some data. And then we just call the send message to parent with this response, and the message event will be sent back to the main application. So now, as we sent a message to the iframe, we received the information in the iframe, we send it back to the main application. Now we need to learn how to intercept it, how to get this response in the main application. And this is actually very similar to what we've done in the proxy application inside of an iframe. We just need to set up once again an event listener that listens to messages, but it will be like outside of the iframe in the main application. And in here, we can do some security, let's say, checks. And we can check if this origin that was target origin, if this event is coming from the resource that we are expecting it to come from. So actually, those messages could be sent to any website. You can create those events of type message on your own in developer console. And so just to protect your website from malicious attacks, from some messages you didn't wait to protect your website from something like that, you may verify the origin that the event came from. And in our case, I want it to only be from the allowed.com domain that we used for our proxy application. And finally, if the event origin is correct, we can use the response from the event property, and yeah, we can do something with that. So in our example, I would return it to the SDK, and SDK will get it to the client application. But yeah, in this example, we'll just get it in the console. So after reviewing all that, let's say, complex architecture, let's just sum up of what we have achieved with all that. So not only our iframe that we used fetched some cross-domain data, so our backend is deployed on one domain, proxy application deployed on second domain, and client application is deployed on like any other third domain, but the security standards, the security requirements were satisfied because the only thing that actually talked to backend was the proxy application deployed on one single domain that we own. Yeah, and with all that approach, we don't need to register new clients. If they want to use a domain of their own, they don't need to let us know. They can just do it. And so it makes the solution very well scaled. So not only this SDK solution can be used in various environments, dev environment, production environment, certification, but also localhost. So we don't even need to think of where to use it. But also it scales really well for different types of messages. So in this example, we only have seen a message that requests information about the users. Let's think of it of a GET request. But with this approach, we can expand on the amount of types of our messages, and we can do like virtually anything you could do with the HTTP API. So we could upload new data to backend, we can read some more data, apply some filtering. So yeah, anything, delete data. So with that, I would like to conclude on this whole story of my experience of some more complicated, advanced use cases of iframes. And I would like to just give you some general advice on what to do and what to follow when you will use an iframe in your application. So yeah, you may use iframes for lots of different reasons. You may not need this complicated architecture we just talked about. You may need, for example, to embed some content, or you will have some like really different scenario from what I've just presented. And here I would like to, let's say, uh, communicate to you some of the best practices that you might follow. So first things first, in case you ever use this post message to communicate between iframes, it is a best practice to always use the second argument after you pass the data object. So always use target origin for post messages. And it gets bounded with the second best practice, always verify the origin. So if you send a message, always use target. And if you intercept a message, if you get it, always verify where it came from. And yeah, in that way, you will be, let's say, safer from some cross-site attacks. Yeah, also, I would advise you to minimize sharing of data between iframes. So all this post-message communication API, it's considered performant and fast, but if you will pass some really big objects that weigh kilobytes or megabytes, it will slow down the performance. And so some of the general advice, if you have some really big object, but you need only a part of data from it, you can just sanitize the rest from it and only send the data you will be using. Yeah, the next tip would be always limit the iframe scope and permissions if possible. So iframes, they can do a lot of stuff to your website. And if you can limit what they actually can do. And that could be achieved by using a special attribute called sandbox. And so whenever you are working with iframes, you just need to check whether you can apply this restriction. Finally, it is a very nice idea to always document the communication protocol and how you use iframes. So what I've just described, like this problem that we had on the project, it grew into a full-fledged production solution that was used by real users. And we were working in a big team, so it was kind of complicated to explain to new people what actually happens. So to avoid all that, it is a very, let's say, smart thing to do to document every step you take with those iframes in their communication. So new people, when they come to your project, they understand what happens. And finally, it is a nice thing to do to understand if your iframe is loaded before you want to actually do something with it. For example, if you do code with it, like want some information from it, it would be nice to just verify if it's already prepared to use. But because, yeah, if it's not, you will just get some error. And that final tip would wrap up this whole technical talk. I hope it wasn't too, let's say, complicated. And now we actually have some times for your questions if you have any. So thank you. All right, so please.
Thank you for a great presentation. You mentioned a little about the performance, but I'm thinking about what is the performance impact on of using the iframes, and is it hard to optimize them?
Okay, so I will need to say your question once again so the online audience hears us. And so the question was, what can be the potential impact on the performance of the web application when you're using the iframes, right? Okay, so there are many layers of how iframes can impact your application. And of course, let's say many of potential performance flows are lying on the shoulders of the developer. But I can say at least something about the following thing. So iframes, they require some memory to get loaded. So you actually load another web application inside of your own. And so it may not be that, let's say, critical when you only load one iframe. but sometimes you need to embed some more information. You need to talk to different domains, or you embedding multiple services. And so this can just take too much of resources of the device that this website is operating on. I would call it mainly front-end issue, because yeah, just the client application that the device it was opened on could not handle this much of random access memory requirement. So yeah, this is like just the general advice I've had in mind. All right. Give me a moment. Maybe we'll have some questions
Yes,
from
we
the
have one
online guys.
question online.
Yeah. Okay. Before that, yeah, we have some. Hello.
For great presentation and
Thank
very
you.
interesting topic. My question is if it's possible to use iframe with some UI frameworks such as React.
Okay, so we had a question if it's possible to use the approach like I've described or any other iframes with some front-end frameworks like React or Angular. And so actually on this project that I've described, we were using React for some UI. Yeah, the solution I presented to you was mainly vanilla, just to be framework agnostic. Like not every person is a React developer after all. But yeah, you can use this iframes techniques with any imaginable framework because this is just vanilla code. So yeah, thank you for the question. All right. Push.
Could you please clarify a bit, like, it looks like, doesn't this iframe proxy app actually eliminates all the client's effort of securing the app? Because it looks like you are providing like an endpoint to abuse the client's app to the whole outer world. And
Yeah, this is
what's the point?
this is a very smart question, and that is actually what happened. So we did have this security restriction on the backend, but what we ended up doing is, yeah, we did satisfy it, but we made a workaround just to make our application work. So we wanted to satisfy the requirements from the backend, and like our client that was in charge of creating this backend, they were not against exposing this whole API to the world. So yeah, we just did a workaround. Thank you. Okay, do we have some more questions?
Yep.
Please.
Thank you for your speech.
Thank you.
Just a quick question. Am I right that proxy app deployed somewhere and the client app deployed somewhere, they share the same window object?
Well, not really. So, yeah, when I was talking about sending message, okay, I need to repeat the question, I guess. I forgot about that. Yeah, the question was if the proxy application and the main application are sharing the window object. So when I was talking about the communication of data back to the main application, I mentioned that you can call post message on window.parent. And so actually they are connected, so you can find a reference on each like window from like your application window, but they don't share it. So from the child application, you can reference window.parent, and from the main application, you will need to reference your iframe.context window, content window. All right. Very good. Yeah, now maybe I will have a look at if we have some questions.
We have 3, I believe.
Okay. Yeah, we do have some time, so I guess I will answer them. Okay, some of them are already answered.
You can skip them then.
Oh, you know, I would like to answer this one at least because I really wanted to add it to my presentation, but I was thinking that it was too much already. So talking about security of iframes, what are the ways they can be hacked? Is there any most popular hacker attack that should be considered when working with iframes? So this is actually a very interesting question. And answering that, I can think of at least 2 most popular hacker attacks on some iframe solutions. So first things first, respecting the fact that iframes are things that deal with data across different domains. So this is across domain data. We have a problem of cross-site scripting called XS, sometimes people call it. And yeah, that can be avoided if you sanitize your data that you send between the iframes, and you always check this target or origin stuff and you use it. In the second, I would say most popular attack on iframe solution could be a DDoS attack. So this is just a brute force attack of giving too much information to the iframe, so it stops your application from working. But I would say this is just an attack that could be performed on any kind of an architecture, not just an iframe. I wouldn't say there's any easy ways of how to protect from it, but sometimes you can rely on some third-party services that will make this protection for you. So I hope that this answers your question. All right, I guess we're mainly done. Okay, please.
How did you wrap you expose your post message in listen message to the client? Did you like wrap it with some function and callback, or you just get them you need to implement this in order to communicate with them?
Okay, yeah, so the question was if we did the code from like the presentation, or did we have some wrapping around this whole logic so the client easily accesses the data? And so yeah, the example I show you is just something, just an example for the sake of the demo. But what we did, we totally encapsulated this iframe solution from the client, so we don't even know there is an iframe. And whenever our SDK was used, it was looking more as working with promises. So simple async await and you get your data. So you don't even need to consider that there is an iframe or some third-party domain. Thank you for the question. All right, I believe we're approaching the time for the next speaker. And yeah, I would like to thank you all who came here and who visited us online. So thank you. And yeah, now we can enjoy the second talk.
Thank you, Vlad, for this speech. And thank you, everyone, yeah, for the questions. Ilya, please join us.
So, hi everyone, welcome to our tech talk. Today's topic will be, you might not need another prop, composition versus props, specifically in React. So let me introduce myself first. My name is Ilya. I'm a software engineer at Grid Dynamics. I have over 3 years of experience in the front end. My main tech stack is React, Tailwind, Next.js, and all these fancy technologies. Today's agenda is the following, but don't be scared of it. It's actually will be quite practical, and you'll see a lot of code examples. So without further ado, I think we can start. So before React, I was a backend engineer. I was a backend engineer using C#, you know, this fancy thing with OP in mind, classes, inheritance, and all of these fancy design principles. But suddenly, my manager came to me and asked whether I would be interested in learning React. And believe it or not, I said, yes, of course, I want to learn React. Who doesn't want to become a full stack engineer, right? And so here we go. A couple of nights with the React documentation. I know about props, components, hooks, and all of this basic stuff. And suddenly I'm getting my first feature request. It was to whip up a bunch of widgets for our application. And actually, let's see what we got here. Oh, that's weather widgets. Pretty simple, right? We've got an icon and a simple temperature. So let's code this up real quick. Here's the code for it. Of course, we're loading our data from the backend, checking for the loading state first, rendering skeleton. And after that, we simply show an icon and the temperature. As simple as that. Nothing really crazy going on here. But the time passes, people start to love our widget, and the manager came to me and said, hey, let's add another widget. So designer works full night, gets everything approved, and sends me over a new Figma file. So let's take a look on that. Okay, what do we got here? First, it's kind of similar to the previous component, I guess. We've got this icon, we've got the temperature, but we've got a couple of more components like location, like temperature information, and the alert. Pretty similar, but it will take some time to implement, right? So to be ahead of time, I simply extracted some components out of it, and basically that's the code. Again, nothing really fancy here. And some time passed. Some people left the team who have worked on the widget. Some people joined the team who have worked on the widget. And the widget has grown into something like this. So we've got the forecast chart. We've got the today's temperature. Also, we've got a bunch of new props to the interface of the widget. And actually, it's still quite understandable, right? So we can still see the weather forecast is loading state, the show min max temperature. It's quite understandable. So nothing wrong is here. And a couple of days passed. My manager came to me and said, hey, how long will it take to implement a widget with a map? But, you know, when the product owner says widget with a map, it's not only a map, it's always something else. In our case, it was a map and a simple info message. So I say, okay, give me a couple of hours, and here's the deal. And what do you think I do next? I simply add 2 more props to the interface. What could went wrong? And let's see what are the pros of props. As you might have seen, first of all, props are easy to add. So we simply add 2 more props and that's it, right? It's straightforward and doesn't require any refactoring, which leads to faster iterations. You can deliver your code much faster than you would, for example, with something else. And also the props give you more constraints. So since you control your props, you only allow the developers use your components the way you want. And that's pretty much it, as I think. But let's revise the widget API real quick. So you might have noticed some issues with that. Maybe. Can you see that? Maybe.
All properties are optional.
Okay, that's correct. You may use maybe the component without props. Props drilling, exactly. What else? Okay, so that's quite common issues with such approaches, but there are much more problems. For example, what if our isLoading state is false and the weather forecast was not passed? Our component will simply break since we get no data from it. Also, what if we, for example, pass show forecast chart false and, for example, pass get date range formatter? In our case, this prop will simply not be used, and why do we need it at all at first? And also, what if we want to customize our info message? For example, change the color, borders, or shadows. We would need to probably add another class name, right? Another prop. And that's the problem. What if we would need to, for example, customize the map or min-max temperature or some other parts of the widget? And that would lead us to more props. And that's the problem. So the cons of props. Props are hard to remove. Props are basically tied with your component internals. So basically, in case you maybe change the internal logic, or maybe you want to extract something, you always need to refactor your whole application and test it again. Also, props are not flexible enough, since we need to add maybe more props, or I don't know, add more props to customize stuff. And a lot of props can become pretty much inflexible and unmaintainable at some point. Also, props introduce developer inconsistency. For example, you might have encountered an issue where, for example, one developer names prop onClick and the second one names it onClicked. So like it's pretty common problem. What about handle mouse over or on mouse over? So some might use handle, some might use on prefix, and like it's pretty inconsistent, and it should be maybe managed in the pull request, I think. And also you might have noticed that constraints mentioned both in pros and cons, because, well, since you introduce constraints, you have to like think of all use cases for your components and basically allow the developers to use them however you want. And yeah, basically that's it about the cons. And do we have an alternative? Can we do better? And I would say, yes, we can do. Throughout my experience with React, I have built more and more components for our UI library, and I've learned about something called composition. Composition, you can think of composition as like Lego. Imagine, for example, a Lego figure. Lego figure usually consists of like the body, the head, the torso, and the legs. And these components parts of the Lego figure are pretty much standardized. You can intercept them and interchange them however you want and build like different Lego figures out of it. So here is an example and how it works in React. In React, we have something called children prop, which allows you to use the composition. Basically, imagine you would want to build, for example, a profile component. A profile component with, let's say, an avatar and the username. You would use something like this, passing the children prop to your component and basically rendering stuff inside of that div. How would that look like in the real world example is the following, basically simple enough. You pass avatar, you pass p tag, and that's it. And yeah, with that in mind, let's get back to our widget component. What if we could have a bunch of blocks, a bunch of small building blocks for our weather widget? For example, I think of it like this. You may maybe create your own components. You may even split it up in much smaller parts, but that's my interpretation. We have a district, we have city and country, we have temperature preview, weather info, and alert. And these components are not tied with each other. They're pretty much abstract. They have single responsibility. There is no bloating logic in it. Basically, weather info doesn't know anything about, for example, district, or alert doesn't follow its margins, paddings, etc. And basically that's how it looks throughout the code. So each component represents like the part of that diagram. We broke like this widget, let's say, into small reusable blocks. Explicit logic that is shown on the screenshot means you can read it pretty fast. You don't need to like dive into, for example, 50 layers of code or so, 50 layers of abstraction. Also, remember that time when we needed to create more widgets each time. For example, the one with the temperature, or the one with the temperature info, and the one with an alert. Each time we would create simply another specific implementation, mostly copying the logic, and that would look not really great at all, I think. And with that approach, we could build, for example, something like this, and this. If you think from the perspective of composition, it looks pretty similar. There is everywhere the location component, everywhere the temperature, and pretty similar blocks. And let's pretty much move to the pros of the composition. First of all, composition allows you to flexibly reuse the code. Reusability, components can be used in different contexts. For example, if you need to build much more widgets, as in our case. Also, composition allows you to better maintain the components, since they're smaller, they're focused on specific parts. They're like follow single responsibility, so they do not know about your application or something else. Also, composition reduces cognitive load, since, as I said, you don't need to dive deep into like 50 layers of abstraction. And the last one is adherence to SRP and OCP, single responsibility principle and open-close principle. Single responsibility principle pretty much, I'm not sure, understandable, since each block is responsible only for its own logic. You don't need to modify it in case your widget changes. And also open-close principle, basically you can extend your components however you want without touching the internals. If we speak about the real-world scenarios of it, it's highly used in Radix, Chakra, and MUI, and its internal components. Yeah, so, but what are the cons of this approach? Since there is always cons, right? And yeah, first of all, it's complexity in structure. More components means more places to manage. For example, if we modify, let's say, a location component, we would need to check other places with it that uses it and retest it also. Also, it might introduce performance overhead, since you have to carefully manage the state of your components, since you might know that when you update state, the whole React re-renders, and basically that might cause performance issues. Also, some would say composition allows for too much flexibility. Basically, you could, for example, reuse your components in unrelated contexts. For example, use part of widget or weather widget in, let's say, header component, which doesn't make sense, or maybe in the footer component, which doesn't make sense. And also, finally, composition leads to repetitive code. Since your components are pretty much copy-pasted, you have to carefully check which implementations are used, and maybe some of them are became pretty general, pretty let's say abstract, so it can become pretty repetitive. And let's compare these two approaches to finalize our speech. First approach, props. It looks quite easy. Props are easy to add. You iterate faster, and basically that's it from my side. And I would suggest you to use it in some specific places of your application, in case you don't need to, for example, reuse the parts of the components. It's mostly one-time usage. You should be fine. Speaking of the composition, it's more generic approach. It's more flexible approach. You have a bunch of building blocks, which you can compose however you want. For example, you might not need an info message or an alert or a map or stuff like that. It's suitable for flexible implementations. Also, you might ask whether like there is a bunch of new lines of code. So there is a lot of lines. It's quite complex to understand, and I would respond to that with the following quote of the current Vercel employee, ex-Meta React maintainer. API design is hard because you can make it seem simple, but it's actually deceptively complex, or make it actually simple but seem complex. That's it from me. Thank you so much. If you have any questions, feel free to ask. Yeah, please.
I think to use composition with atomic design,
Mhm.
but I have another question. What about combining composition with use context?
Yeah, thank you so much. So yeah, let's repeat the question. What about combining composition with context? Actually, it's a pattern in React called compound components. You can simply create like a common wrapper, let's say, for example, dialog or dialog where you manage like the open state. And basically, that's it. You have a generic context which handles all of this open states. And later you simply render content by using composition. Yeah, I hope.
Thank you very much
Yeah,
for the
thank you.
presentation.
Yeah. Do we have any other questions? Yeah, please.
In case some of the components are like dependent on each other, so you make them as one, or there is a way to because if before they were only one component, now they're separated into two different components. But let's say they are dependent on each other.
So let me repeat the question and clarify it maybe. You say that what if we have components that are dependent on each other? And how do we use that with the composition approach? Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, so I think first of all, you could build smaller blocks. For example, let's say one small block responsible for one thing and the other block responsible for the other thing. And let's say you could pass the needed state through props. Props are still there, they're not going away. And basically you could wrap that into like a more specific component. For example, it would be used in specific part of your application. So you would simply like create a wrapper around it, which would handle like this component interaction with each other. And that's basically how I would do that. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you. Do we have any other questions here? Maybe online?
We have only one comment. If you really want to use composition, you could force composition inside composition.
Yeah, it's quite true. And also, yeah, you could composition mostly is like passing the JSX through props. So basically composition is really a prop. As I've mentioned, it's simply children prop. So you basically pass the JSX you want to render to it. So basically, yeah, you can compose over composition.
Okay, thank you very much for this presentation. I think that we can stop here online part and you can continue networking and questions for offline part. Thank you everyone who visited it online and offline both, and hope to see you at our next meetup. Thank you, Ilya.
Thank you.